Hello, everyone, and welcome to Global Women for Wellbeing's Wine and Tea Wednesdays. I'm Mim Senft, co-founder and CEO of GW4W, and we hope you have a beverage and going to relax a little bit with us and join us again for a wonderful and inspiring, I know it's going to be inspiring conversation with our guest today. I am really excited to have our guest, Dr. Tausha Orakwue, who I have had the great pleasure of known for many years. She is the founder of Xperi Consulting, which is a boutique consulting firm specializing in corporate benefits, wellness, health equity initiatives. She holds a doctoral degree in health policy administration from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. In her earlier career, she worked as the Director of Health and Productivity Strategy at Icon Enterprises, is the co-founder of Alterity Group, which was sold to NFP, and she is on the Health, MedTech, and Future Workplace Advisory Board for South by Southwest. She also happens to be a founding member of GW4W and has served on the board for the first 4 years of the organization. So we are just delighted to have you with us. Tausha, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to jump right in, and you're a female leader, woman of color, and you have definitely faced some challenges in your career. I know you've been kind enough to share some of those stories with me. Knowing that the path was not necessarily going to be easy, what influenced you to become an entrepreneur?
Wow, I can't say that, there was anything in my education or background that said to me like, oh, I'm just going to start a company. I just, preparation met an opportunity. When my former boss and I started Alterity Group, it was just an opportunity. She was leaving and started something, and then I joined her as a partner in that firm. It wasn't a plan. Yeah, I can't honestly say that I woke up one morning and said, I want to be an entrepreneur. That wasn't it at all. It was really having enough confidence in myself and in her that we could make something successful together and figure it out along the way. I mean, quite frankly, we were two ladies in our laptops when that company started, but proud to say it grew into a really wonderful boutique firm that was bought by NFP. And she and I have both gone on to other pursuits, but remain great friends, and are proud of that accomplishment. So I can't say that I woke up one day and say, this is what I'm going to do. It just was an amazing opportunity that presented itself when I was ready, whether I thought I was or not. So I just took the opportunity.
So if I'm remembering correctly, did you guys meet on a scuba diving trip?
We did. So rewind the tape for a long way. I was in Aruba celebrating finishing my dissertation and just decompressing. Had, a group of friends met up down there, and I was the only one who's a scuba diver. So I went on a scuba diving day trip that day, and Kim Davis and her husband at the time were on the boat. And we were sitting right across from each other. There was no one else on the boat but us. So of course you're going to chat, right?
Yeah.
So we started chatting and talking about, the work that she did, work that I had just finished in school. And she said, well, we're thinking of doing some things at our organization, which at the time was Icon Enterprises. And she had been working for Carl's organization for many years, and they were building out some of their infrastructure around managing the healthcare across all the portfolio companies that they owned. And so we exchanged information on like wet dive paper and go back to the United States with this piece of paper that I scribbled this lady's name, and she scribbles my name on there. And I can't honestly say that I thought much would come out of it, but I get home and I get back to, at the time I was living in North Carolina because I was finishing school there, and I had a housemate, and she happened to be in business school at Duke. So I'm telling her about this Icon organization, because at the time, I mean, I'm coming from public health. I knew nothing about private equity at all, hedge funds, any of that. So shared with her that, yeah, I think it's this lady, and she works at this place, and she was like, really? And so she gives me the whole spiel and preps me for the conversation. with Kim because I had no clue what that industry was about. So anyway, it all worked out. She ended up hiring me
Ah,
to come and work at Icon to help her build out the health and productivity offerings and consolidations, and kind of streamline that spend. So it was great. It was a great experience.
yeah, it's so amazing how one conversation and just being open, what it can
Yes,
lead to. It's just
absolutely, absolutely,
extraordinary. And
absolutely.
yeah. So I think for any of us that have ever been an entrepreneur, uh, we know that there's going to be, you go into it, you don't necessarily know they're going to be challenging times. You sort of do, but not quite,
Right.
at the level. So, what are some of the things, I think everybody wants to know, how do you get through some of those tough times? Like what are some of the things that you can advise those that are out there that are struggling right now?
Yeah.
How to
You
keep going?
you have to take it one day at a time. I can think back to, like, because currently now it's me, and then I work with other consultants as I need to on projects. So I don't have the responsibility of people who are, depending upon us for a paycheck. That was very different than when it was, with Alterity Group. So even if you're a solopreneur, I'll frame it that way. Just think about every day, just get through that day because you can experience as an entrepreneur your highest high and your lowest low in the same day, uh, because you could get great news about a project and then something could fall apart on another one, all in the same day. But you just have to give yourself grace and try to do the best that you can. And I also find that it's particularly in the service kind of business. I can't speak a lot for a business that is based upon, selling widgets or anything like that, selling services, selling consulting. Relationships make the whole difference, because if your clients can see you as a human being, they generally, and if you're doing a great job on the services that you're providing, I think you can generally get through anything, because most of the time, if they're hiring a consultant, you are kind of pivotal to their success in their boss's eyes usually. So it's in their best interest to work with you to make sure that you guys both collectively meet the goal. So I would say just focus on one day at a time, because I know when you get those body blows basically of things that go wrong, it's easy to kind of
Mhm.
spiral and just get yourself off your game entirely. I would say, rein it all in, and this is just today. Tomorrow is a new start. That's one thing I would say, because you know we can talk about the mechanics of running a business, but I think what becomes more important is your grit and your resilience. That's the things that people don't account for. You can be an expert at something, you can be the best at it, but to change that into a business, the thing that's going to get you through it is obviously strong business skills, but um, equally or more importantly, your grit and resilience to get through tough times.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you separate grit and resilience, that, thinking about that through, those two lenses. And I like that you mentioned grace. I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough grace. We
No,
beat ourselves up a little bit too much,
yes.
particularly if you're the one that's providing those paychecks, as you pointed out. But yeah, this idea of being able to care for yourself
Mhm.
through this process makes a lot of sense. It's really interesting to me because, obviously you've been, worked in many different industries, but your background is a little bit different than some of the other folks that you've worked with, because you do have, this degree in health policy and administration. So how has that education influenced your approach to leadership in the corporate world?
Yeah, I think what it taught me how to think in systems, and to think about the big picture in not just a visionary way, but a strategic way. And it helped me understand how to break it apart into actionable bite-sized pieces,
Hmm.
because I think what happens many times, we have leaders who are incredible visionaries, but when it comes to trying to execute on that, if they don't have a strong team of more tactical operational folks under them to translate that, you can kind of end up in this cycle of big vision, nothing happens, big vision, nothing happens, and you know
Hmm.
it happens. They can make a deck about it, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful, and then you call a year later and try to figure out what happened with X, program, nothing. And so I think that it did has taught me to take a step back and think about it more systematically. It's not to say that, I mean, I think the visionary role is critical, in just thinking what if, right? But also putting things into a framework that can be executed upon. I think that's what I bring to the table in um, from a leadership perspective. I think it's really critical because most of the problems that we are seeing now is particularly in the benefits and global benefits. These are big problems. These are most of the time public health problems. If you think about what's going on with COVID and how the pandemic itself has impacted businesses that I work with, and how mental health as a whole has been impacted globally by all of the things that have occurred as a result of this pandemic. So, trying to impact large scale um, kind of things like that really lend themselves to having a strategic framework for approaching it versus just kind of here, there approach, or just trying to play whack-a-mole and dealing with the symptoms rather than dealing with the issue.
Yeah, I know that, you and I have had conversations about, obviously healthcare and health inequities.
Mhm.
And what are you seeing out there with leaders around that particular piece of it, particularly with this kind of intersectional conversation between obviously everything that we're talking about with the pandemic, but
Mhm.
also through a diversity lens?
Yeah, I think, I belong to a couple different forums that, are really smart people that I love to converse with around these issues. But um, I would say that leaders now are starting to connect the fact that, particularly around if we use mental health as a subject matter, particularly in a business space, you're looking at mental health not just an issue of someone who has a clinical condition that's been diagnosed and you need to provide benefits for them to have treatment. You're looking at it through a diversity lens, to say that there are many things that can contribute to someone having challenges with their mental health. Doesn't mean that they have there's a separate group of folks that are, have a diagnosed clinical condition that they're trying to manage and stay well. But then there's a separate group of people, or along that continuum, I shouldn't say it that way, along that continuum, there are people who are, generally speaking, in a well, managing things well, but then all of the financial, family, work, you name it, things that have happened during this pandemic, isolation, have really triggered some situations by which they're struggling with their mental health. And so, how do you start to um, identify what those triggers are? And B, if whatever realm you work in, are you able to provide any support and resources for people to meet them where they are? So, people's lives are, kind of changed forever by this pandemic, but some of the triggers to challenges around mental health, like financial stress, like, you know, um, individuals that are trying to come out to their families and friends, that didn't change because of the pandemic. Some of that has been exacerbated and in kind of in a pressure cooker environment. So we see that leaders are recognizing that it's beyond just, I need to offer a benefit for mental health coverage. We need to think about more broadly how we offer resources to support um, employees in all different facets of their life, because all of those things could cascade to somewhere on this continuum of challenges with mental health. So
Yeah, and that's really encouraging to hear. This one size fits all, and of course, if you've got a million things to think about, obviously any leader does, all the
right.
different pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, hopefully coming out of this pandemic, we're looking at this and recognizing that depending on your experience through this,
Right.
I mean, even the people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, talking about financial health and well-being, and not recognizing that some of these people are going to have balloon payments for rent or
Yes.
mortgage.
Yes.
And I hope there are leaders out there thinking about this, because they
Exactly.
don't need to hear about saving for their retirement right now if they may lose the roof over their
Right.
heads.
Right. And I've seen it in many of the, like I said, forums that I belong to, that, the large companies, I will say, are thinking quite a bit about, financial wellness as that piece of this bigger pie, and trying to help folks find balance in their life. So that's promising. I think most companies have a challenge is that you can create programs all day. Like, how do you get good adoption and good participation in them, and removing stigma, and making sure you have an environment that employees feel safe accessing
Yeah.
services and resources. That's a bigger change, I think, than just offering a thing or a service or a program.
Yeah, no, I think that really resonates in terms of, people putting in policies and statements, and this is what we want to do. But does the culture support the change? Does the culture allow people to get to the resources that they need when they need them? And is it even the resource that makes sense for that particular culture within your culture?
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting because I think with all this like reimagining of how work gets done,
Mm-hmm.
that it's also this huge opportunity for leaders right now.
It is, and you'll see it. As you read, many of the companies are starting to rethink that, like what their workplace looks like, how people will work, where they work in the office or from home or some hybrid. Um, all of that is going on. I mean, I think there's a fundamental shift in the world of work at this point. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. But the secondary shift there is, what are the most value, how you drive the most value in terms of the benefits that you offer people. They may look very different than they did pre-pandemic, just because the way we work and how life is has fundamentally changed.
Yeah, and that intersectionality between how work gets done and the health and well-being of your employees, and starting to hear more of that integrated conversation
Mm-hmm.
is also very hopeful, I think, for a lot of
Yes, it
people
is.
out
It
there, right?
is. It is. Well, I think
Yeah.
the opportunity, I think, there's for sure certainly challenges around the Zoom fatigue and the constant, being online, but and some of the challenges with the beginning and the end of a workday, just kind of feeling like you're always on. There's, that can be worked out, I believe. But I
Mhm.
think one thing that came, I'm going to use this word again. I think we gave each other a little bit more grace.
Mhm.
Folks kind of lowered their expectations that women, would never have a child walk behind them, or a man, or women or men with children would never have a child interrupt a call or need something in the course of an 8-hour, 9-hour day, that they'll never be visible or whatever. I think we gave folks more grace. At least I would hope so. I think we all kind of just laughed it off when miscellaneous pets passed through or
We've
little
seen it on
hands.
CNN, right? You see it on major networks. So I think it's just opened up this, it's almost a more human
It
conversation.
is.
We can
It
take off the
is.
mask a little bit and just
It
say,
is.
hey, I'm at home. This
Yes.
happens. I mean,
Yes.
I have a door
Doing the
behind me.
best I can.
I'm gonna go to the store. Right, exactly.
Right.
I think it also it creates some connection that might not have been there before.
I think that's right. You get a little bit of a window into, people's world outside of work. And for the most part, I think that has been a positive. But then I've also, heard from others that it feels intrusive,
Hmm.
that they don't want that in their world. So it's from a manager perspective, I think that there's really a delicate balance. They're trying to understand your team and how they work best, and just making room for the fact that there are some people who really don't want their cameras on all the time, because maybe they don't want you to see that part of their life. And if that's the case, kind of how do you find a happy medium? Because clearly you do need to have some interaction.
Right.
But I think just being mindful, again, the diversity along that spectrum, um, that everybody's not the same, and treat them as an individual, as a human, and just understand that, yes, this is our new way of working, but how is this working for you? Are there things that we can do to make you feel more comfortable with it? Or are you having any challenges with it? Because
Yeah.
that's, just kind of part of that management process if you're
Whoever
employee
thought we'd be
centric.
talking about like teaching people how to use green screens
Yeah.
as like a,
Yeah.
way of kind of addressing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've debated about that. I've just personally, I have,
Yeah.
because sometimes I'll do things in different parts of the house. But I think you're right. There's this whole discussion, just basic health and well-being. I've talked to people that have been on Zoom and Zoom and Zoom and Zoom and Zoom and Zoom, and like it's talking about like I didn't have time to eat. I'm like, you're in your house. You're like, how many steps from your kitchen? And so I think you're 100% right. Is thinking about, from a health and well-being perspective and a productivity perspective, people have to eat.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do we build into the work schedule and just make sure that people are getting that recovery time, that downtime?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of folks end meetings at the 50-minute mark to give people 10 minutes to run down the hall, to do whatever, reorient, and get back for another one. Now, it doesn't always work, but it's a good first step. The fact that you're acknowledging that having back-to-back calls is probably not the best way to approach, people being productive and kind of trying to manage their work life and their home life at the same time.
Yeah, and practically, I've always said this. It's like, well, if you do meetings back to back to back, when do you get the work done? Like, we're going to talk about it, but don't you have to have time to execute on?
There's that, right? That's absolutely
a little tiny piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, being an organization focused on gender equity, and clearly women in the workplace have been impacted tremendously over the past 12 months. What are some of the ways that you think we can more effectively accelerate closing the gender leadership gap? And what do you see as positive, measurable change?
Wow. So that requires a whole nother hour here, man. But
I know.
Yeah,
It's a big question, big hairy
short.
question.
So in terms of addressing that leadership gap, I think that really is a focus on culture in within companies. What is it that you deem important about building out a diverse and strong leadership team? And if you can't see the value in that, then it's going to trickle downstream to whatever whatever initiatives that you put on paper to circulate or whatever deck you create. I do think that being open to different ways of being to get to leadership. I think we have this cookie cutter approach to, you had to go to this school, you had to do this program, you had to do this in order to be promoted to this, that, or the third, right? And so if you're really interested in garnering a diverse workforce, a diverse leadership team, you've got to create a pipeline. And that pipeline is not always going to come from the same places that you've been looking before. So I think, there are plenty of talented candidates that are diverse from all different components of diversity, but you have to be willing to open your view, your lens, your aperture to see them, right? And so once you see them and get them into your pipeline and developing them, you have to treat them like individuals and develop them in the way they need to be developed versus whatever cookie cutter version of leadership development you have. Because it doesn't work for everyone. You've created this and it's been designed for a specific group of people. Anybody outside of that, it typically is just an exercise kind of in futility. Even if you do manage to get into those programs, it's not addressing the things that you necessarily need to be a strong leader. So I would say opening up that aperture and creating a pipeline that reflects the type of leadership that you'd like to have going forward.
Yeah, there's so many interesting stories out there. And I think sometimes when we talk about diversity and inclusion and, the thinking broader about all the different buckets and again, the intersectionalities.
Yes.
Is, and it is more complex. It does make it a little bit more difficult. But as you pointed out earlier on, there's lots of decks about this and wonderful statements about what we're going to do. And,
right.
And yay, we made progress, like 0.03 increase in whatever,
Right.
And I would hope that in the world that we are in, that leaders are understanding the financial benefits
sure.
of having truly diverse teams. I mean, gender diverse, but diversity from all these different perspectives. And this idea that if you're a leader, it has to be important to you. It's not about being important to them or that group.
Right.
You as a leader, no matter what your background is.
Right.
Um,
And initiatives around, creating a more diverse workforce are not about, you can't have a lens of this charity. You have to have a lens that this is creating value for
yeah.
our organization. We are, just like you do other things to, drive efficiency and economies of scale and productivity and all these things that you do to make your business more effective. This is just one more thing. It's not
Yeah.
charity. It's
No,
making your
no, no,
business
no. It's actually
more
the reverse. It's
exactly.
actually making your organization more resilient,
Right.
potentially opening you up to better and faster innovation.
Absolutely.
And, and I mean, there's just great examples of this
Right.
around looking at a product or a service. And I'll just tell you, going into a hotel room, getting a little older and looking down on something, and everything was like an 8 point, like it was so tiny. And I'm thinking, somebody much younger than me designed this, because this is supposed, it was a hotel room, and you're thinking, well, if this was an emergency card or something,
Right. You couldn't
it's
read
not going to work for me,
it.
right? So it just begs the question, like, is this really the right way to approach this? Is this the right thing to bring into the marketplace? And there's just so much data that shows when you have that diversity of
Thought.
voice and
Yeah,
all the
experiences
different
and
ways.
thought, not just the visual diversity, but the
Right.
experiences and thought.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That you're just going to be, it's really a financial advantage.
I agree.
And
I agree.
yeah, we need a whole lot more of that, clearly.
Right.
So you've been involved in GW4W since we first started talking about it and incorporated. And so, of course, I'm going to ask you, why did you want to be involved in GW4W? What was it about the mission of empowering more healthy female leadership at all levels? What about that appeals to you?
Well, I mean, I've worked in environments that are really high pressure, high stress, high performance, high, all those things. But I also recognize how big of a difference it makes to have somebody, particularly in leadership within that organization, that has perspective on some framework for balance and changing the norms such that you create space for a healthier way of work and being for your employees. So having had that experience and seeing what a difference that makes, when you talk to me about the organization and the work that you're trying to do, it resonated because, you know, I can work hard with, there's not many who can outwork me in that respect, but I also recognize that that's not I don't want to drive around in fifth gear all the time, right? So you really want to find some way to be able to, kind of go up and down as I need to and throttle back when I need to in order to preserve my energy, my space, my and regenerate to be able to do my best work. So I recognized how important that was to encourage and support leadership that incorporates that mindset, that everything is not about just drive everybody into the ground and, toss them to the side when they can't work like that anymore. That's just not healthy. It's not sustainable and it's not effective for organizations. So that's why I wanted to be involved.
Yay. Yeah. And it really, it's interesting. I mean, having, we've now had conversations, obviously, globally,
Mhm.
and it's really interesting to hear how some of these themes really do resonate. Doesn't matter. The industry doesn't matter. The geography doesn't necessarily matter. The cultural background, it shows up differently, like in
Yes.
the way it gets described and, and how we look at it. But this idea that the world needs more healthy female leaders, not to replace men. It's not about,
Right.
just, we need everybody, and we need
Exactly.
everybody to be at their healthiest.
Right.
But and that's obviously a discussion that for another day.
Right.
About male leader, which we've been talking to a lot of people about that piece of it too. But this opportunity for all of us in our different working environments
Mhm.
to really start to explore, what does it mean to be a healthy leader, not just physically, but
Mhm.
mentally, and
Mhm.
healthy in terms of how we're connected to purpose.
Mhm.
And so many stories. I know because you and I have talked on the back end, but I mean, so many stories of people that have said, I used to travel all the time and I love to travel, but I think I'm not going to do that coming out of this at the same rate.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
there's a lot of data that's saying that is reporting survey data of employees and just capturing how they're thinking about work differently. So it'll be, incumbent upon employers to listen to that because if they're trying to attract and retain, a diverse workforce, they're going to have to listen to your point, these discoveries that people have made about the way that they work and what they want in the go forward or don't want. Because if you're not offering that, they'll go to another company that's offering those things or maybe start their own company. So
yeah.
there will be a pretty seismic shift in terms of, people deciding that some things are more important to them than others. It's not the same status quo as we go forward.
Yeah, I really hope, particularly for working women, and this is true at all levels, is that
Mhm.
there is much more focus
Mhm.
around caregiving, and whether it's for
Mhm.
children or older adults. And the children, we've seen a lot of that in the news. What we've not seen as much about is caring for older, aging, adults. And yet, we're getting older and older as a workforce.
Mhm.
There are more and more people that have to work longer because they
Mhm.
got hit both by the financial meltdown and now by COVID.
Right.
And so this opportunity to rethink that talent pool and how
Mhm.
to support them is going to be, I think, probably competitive advantage if for the
Sure.
the leaders
Yeah.
to do this effectively. But as always, this always goes way too fast, and we could probably be talking for another half hour about all of this. But just so grateful for you taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, ma'am.
And we just want to thank everybody for joining us. Please put your comments, thoughts in the chat, either here for this recording or if you're listening to it after we run. We always like to hear your point of view. And if you have an idea about something you'd like us to discuss, just give us a shout at info@gw4w.com. You're welcome to join us. Other hand, welcome to join us through our website. And until we get together again, please remember that great minds sip together. We'll see you next week.